Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie noob nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink I actually have in sample form, because I was all out of cartridges. It's by Parker. It's from their Quink series. It's Washable Blue. Now, they do have a standard blue, and when you get them in cartridges, the little ends are different colors. So the way you can tell the difference between washable blue and their regular blue is that the washable blue is more opaque and it's lighter. Now, the washable, I think, is the cartridge that I have always gotten whenever I've gotten any Parker pens. And I have some issues with it, but anyways, the two pens that I used were this Parker VittaR. It's Tuxedo, it's a metal pen, and it's in medium, which is pretty moderate all on its own. But I also use this Ohto Tasche, which has a Japanese fine nib, so it's pretty darn fine. And this ink is really light, as you can tell from the swatches. And I didn't have anything like this because I don't have anything this light. Here's Montblanc's Royal Blue, which is nothing like it. Here's Waterman's Serenity or Florida Blue, which is lighter, but is still nothing like it. And Noodler's Polar Blue, which is also nothing like it. Wasn't that helpful? Anyways, I tend to, when I go on short trips and I just want to bring one pen, and because a lot of times when I go on short trips, I just take a Moleskine. I take like a volant, and so this is from my trip to Spain for like 2 weeks in 2012, and yeah, I decorate my notebooks. And the thing is, the longer that this ink is on some kind of paper, the lighter it gets. So here it's been, what, 4 years, and look at how light that is. That's barely readable. But yeah, so, and it's like that for like the whole several pages. So, yeah. It's, I have my issues with it. But, yeah. I thought I'd see what it could hold itself up against. And here, it really couldn't stand water. And 1/3 bleach actually turned it yellowish, which was weird. Ammonia pen flush absolutely destroyed it. Denatured alcohol, surprisingly, or not surprisingly at all actually, did absolutely nothing, and hydrogen peroxide makes it look like it was never there. But what's curious about this is, so let's look at the chromatography. Now usually when we see a chromatography like this, we see like that where it was before is totally blank, and all the ink is up at the top. That's usually what a really washable ink looks like. Here, not so much. We have this clear dot at the bottom, we have a little bit fading up, and that's about it. Looks more like a permanent ink, or acts that way on the chromatography. Here I let it dry, which is not how you're supposed to do it, and as you might be able to tell, nothing moved, which was somewhat surprising. Now, paper test, top down in density, Clairefontaine 90 grams per square meter. Yeah. My eyes hurt. It's so light. It's so light, and it's really kind of watery looking. Shocker. But because it's kind of watery looking, we do get a good bit of shading. Now, I think I did these tests sometime in the last 2 weeks, so they haven't even been on the paper that long, so they might continue to get lighter. But yeah, the Ohto Tasche took 8 seconds to dry, the VittaR in medium took 15, and I just circled these things around the edge because I was noticing some weird feathering, and that's because it's from the back of the notebook. So, but other than that, it's very well behaved. No real bleed or feather or spread or any of that stuff. There's no sheen. It's slightly wet, which kind of surprised me. I'd say it's about a 6.5, so it's definitely on the wet side, but it's not obscene yet, but you will kind of notice it. And here's what's also curious, is not all of it fled from water. A lot of it did. That Ohto Tasche is pretty much gone, but the medium is also much lighter, but it's not completely gone. That's more what I was expecting, and not what I got. Now next up is Fabriano paper, which I've started to include. It's 85 grams per square meter. It's not as steamroller smooth as Clairefontaine. It's not ceramic coated the way that Rhodia is, and it tends to handle inks that even Rhodia and Clairefontaine struggle with. So, and it's pretty accessible, and it's not terribly expensive, so I've started to include it. But yeah, here, again, we see some significant shading, but it already starts out so light. This is such a light blue. The Ohto Tasche took 11 seconds, which I didn't really understand, and the medium vector took 17. Here we do get a bit of a halo in the darkest parts. Yeah, and there's like this microscopic red sheen in spots. I can't really explain it, but yeah. Yeah, no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen. All good in that regard. Here, the water test was much more along the lines of what I was expecting. That's really gone. In fact, the camera's darkening it up a fair bit. You can kind of make out the dots from the grid that I made, but yeah, the writing's really gone. Next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter. Oh God, this ink is so light. Yeah. The Ohto Tasche took 5 seconds to dry. The medium vector took 12. But here we get some of that micro halo sheen. I wish that would show up on camera. The dogs are angry. And you get a lot of shading, but that shading comes from it being so like light and undersaturated. And look here, even in the wettest parts, you can still make out the dot from the grid paper. But yeah, yeah, no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen, all good in that regard. Water test obliterated it. It is really gone. You practically can't tell that anything was ever there. Next up is Tomoe River paper, which is a cream paper and is known for drawing out dry times and shading and sheen, and we do get some more of that red halo sheen on here. You see that? Vaguely even. But yeah, and we do get a lot of shading, but once again, I feel like that shading just sort of highlights how light and thin and undersaturated this ink is. I mean, if we're just looking at the fine, it's actually kind of painful to try and read. It's just too light and it's too small. But yeah, the Ohto Tasche took 8.5 seconds to dry. The medium vector took 13, which isn't too bad. But yeah, I mean, we get shading, we get a nice halo effect. It's just... And then this paper is known for letting ink wash away when you add more water, and it most certainly did. That is utterly gone. The only thing you can make out are the dots from the medium nib. Now, because both of these pens are so moderate and, you know, not hardcore at all, I decided to keep using both of them for the next 3 tests. And I was honestly expecting better results because from my memory, this ink did fairly well on sheet paper. My memory apparently was wrong. Here's the world's worst 20-pound copier paper. And we get spread. Noticeable spread. Got quite broader. We really lose all shading, really. I mean, maybe there's like a vague hint between there and there, but, you know. And I don't know why it took 4.5 seconds and 5 seconds to dry, respectively, because it obviously soaked in. You get this very woolly texture. You get feathering. It's not great. You get bleed, which is kind of surprising. It's just hard to see because the ink is so light anyway, but yeah. And the water test, now the absorbent papers tend to suck the ink in, make it harder to wash out, which I guess is kind of what happened here. You can't see that there was something there at some point, but it is so light and so gone mostly. Next up is Mead Notebook Paper, which is really cheap and you can get it at pharmacies, and they gave it to us for free for our lab notebooks at school. It's physically thinner than 20-pound copier paper, but lately it's been outperforming the 20-pound copier paper. And I guess it did a bit in spread. It didn't spread nearly as much, especially with the Ohto Tasche. But we do get feathering. See, and behaved. And we see it in the rest of the writing as well. But yeah, here the Ohto Tasche took 3 seconds to dry. The medium vector took 4.5. And we get this woolly texture. It's undersaturated. It's not great. But we got essentially no bleed, so that's nice. And even if there was, it would probably be too light to notice. And again, this is a more absorbent paper, so it sucked some of the ink in, made it harder to wash out, but it was so light already. And actually, the camera's darkening it up a fair bit on here, but yeah. Now, lastly is Moleskine paper. And this is like why I put up with this ink at all, because it tends to, from my memory, do kind of okay. But here it did not. So, yeah, there's definitely shading, or not shading, feathering. There's definitely spread. There is no shading. It took 4 seconds for the Ohto Tasche to dry, and yet 3 for the medium vector. I have no explanation for that. It's really, my camera shut off. Fix the light. So, yeah, it really didn't do well on here. It's still so light, and yet it feathered and exploded. And we got bleed, and the thing is, like, so here, let's see if I can get this. So, like, these 3 lines are the medium, and we get bleed. But then we also get bleed on that extremely fine nib. So, I don't know, but yeah, also, this is a fairly absorbent paper, so it sucked the ink in, made it harder to wash out. But it's, like, patchy where it kept it and where it ran it off, and just, meh. It's a mess. So, yeah. So, there you go. There's, Parker Quink Washable Blue. It is an obscenely light blue ink. Not always washable in the more absorbent pens, but, yeah. And it's not as well behaved on the cheap papers as I remember, but, yeah, so for your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching. Bye.